I like tabletop RPG games like D&D, but it's been hard to play in person due to, well, conflicting schedules, figuring out locations, and the fact that, well, the world was in literal chaos not too long ago. Luckily, this is the 21st century, and with things like Discord, it's easier than ever to play games with other people. But there is a lack of visuals that D&D in person kind of has. So enter Dungion 3D. This is a 3D virtual tabletop game that I've actually gotten to try out before it hit the virtual shelves on Steam. And according to the developer, there's no virtual tabletop game like this one in full 3D. It's an ambitious project for sure, and I found myself really interested in it, so let's get talking about it. I'm going to start with the positives here. This game is quite charming, and it gave me massive flashbacks to my childhood of playing around in Warcraft 3's world editor. You're essentially given a map with some randomly generated tiles and told to just go at it. Essentially, the only thing that really limits you here is your imagination, and that's really cool. I didn't really have any set idea in mind of what I wanted to make with this map, so I just kind of decided that I would decorate the map and come up with a game and story as I went along. I started by making just a small little island in the corner of the map and slowly decorated with some trees, foliage, a few little aesthetic things here and there, just to make it feel more alive, and even with the simplistic look of this game, it ended up looking really nice, and I was pretty happy with it. I was surprised with how much fun it was to just kind of clean up this area, changing the tiles around, making things look a little cleaner, and I spent a surprising amount of time doing this, and it really disappeared like nothing. It was a really good time. And things ultimately ended up feeling really vibrant and alive, which was great because that was my goal, except that was only the island and now I had a whole map I needed to play with. I continued playing around as I edited the map further down and continued an intended path that I wanted my players to follow. Decorating the area was surprisingly easy to do, and despite there being next to no indication of what to do or how to do things, I found myself figuring things out with relative ease. I won't bore you on every little thing that I built or decorated around the map, but further on I ended up building this little town, and it's here that I began to worry. There's not many different character types to choose from, and so when it came to populating my town, I kind of worried that it would just look like I was copying and pasting the exact same characters. But it's actually pretty easy to customize these characters into unique people. You do need to use a little bit of imagination, but you can change their size, their color of their hair, body, or clothes, and you can even give them unique names, and it really does a good job at making everybody in this town feel like their own individual characters, rather than just clones of each other. Even the dungeon aesthetics were kind of fun. I worked on a little tiny dungeon inside of a forest, which was inhabited by cat girls because, why not? The characters were there and it looked fun. One thing that did surprise me was how easy it was to plop items on top of each other, which allowed me to place a variety of different items like bottles or skulls on top of tables, which made the tables in general look less plain and really worked well just to add an extra bit of decoration to the world. You could even place enemies on top of things like I did with these demons, which I placed on top of trees, and that's really fun and just goes on to add further to the game. I did end up going a little bit overboard on the trees on this map, but by the end, with the graphics turned up, it ended up looking honestly really gorgeous, and I liked the look of this forest off in the distance, so I was pretty happy with what I had done. There's something to these simple visuals that really make this game honestly beautiful, and with the extra little bit of flair that comes along with the Unreal Engine, it really cranks it up to 11. Oh, and also there's the option to open an internet browser, which is really cool and a creative idea while you're playing, because if you're particularly bored, you can open up your favorite content creator and just watch them instead of playing D&D. However, here's the thing, we need to get into the negatives here. My PC by no means is weak, and in general, it can throw basically anything I throw at it. I know that my GPU is my biggest issue, and I have an older card. I have a GTX 1070, if that means anything to anybody watching this. But this game is far from something that looks like it should be too resource intensive, but it was. When I was playing this, it ate up a lot of my 32 gigabytes of RAM, and it struggled to hold a steady frame rate with anything above the lowest graphic settings. In fact, my frames actually got so bad that when I was hosting a session with my friends, it dropped to about 9 frames per second, which was absolutely abysmal, and it was chugging at even the lowest of settings. I have no idea what was causing this on my computer, as I actually had fewer processes running in the background than I did when I was level editing, but it was so slow that I actually had to get my friend to record the gameplay footage from her end. Weirdly though, my friend's graphics card is an AMD RX 580, which is actually slower than my GTX 1070, so I really don't understand what was going on here. Getting started also isn't the most intuitive of things. The title screen really doesn't give you much to go off of, and essentially what you need to do to get started is click on Select Map, and then you can click on Create there, which is kind of weird that there isn't just a Create Map button right there. You might have also noticed that there's this message on the title screen that says that hex maps aren't the most stable, but by default it gives you a hex map to work with, and it doesn't exactly tell you how to switch to a regular square map. I also encountered this weird glitch at the start of my level making experience where everything was completely black for some reason. My friend actually also ended up experiencing this issue when we started playing multiplayer together, and the only solution that I could find was that I had to spam click the time button in the top corner to cycle through all the time settings and get the game bright again. But it's weird that it would even start this dark. I also don't particularly love the way you select tiles. You would imagine with most things where you can just kind of click and drag over the tiles and it would select all the tiles and then you can change multiple of them at once, and that is the way it works in this game. But oh boy, was this ever insanely slow. It selects tiles individually, one by one, until it fills up your selection box. And this can be egregiously slow. Like, it's ridiculous. I've never seen something like this in a game before that took so long. Due to this, it was really hard to remove the fog of war that I had set up for our playthrough. And that kind of ended up hindering the experience just a little bit. Not enough for it to ruin anything, but enough that I actually had to pause the game at certain points so that I could remove fog of war. That are just kind of vibing.
Huh?
And we slowly go further. Fog of war off. Oh my god, I thought I highlighted more than that.
You did one.
Speaking of slow, the camera speed is about as slow as molasses. Even with it cranked up to the max, it felt really, really slow. Camera controls were also a little bit wonky, and it felt like I was fighting the camera at certain times instead of it working with me. I also encountered this fun little thing early on where I accidentally deleted a tile and found out that you can't re-add tiles that you remove, and there's no undo button. I also took a bit of an issue with the way that you size your map. Essentially, you tell the map how many blocks you want it to be on the x-axis, how many blocks you want it on the y-axis, but neither of them are labeled X or Y. Not the end of the world, but what is kind of the end of the world is the fact that if you resize your map, it completely erases everything that you've done, which is kind of scary because you can't manually save in this program. So if you resize it by accident, or you resize it without realizing it'll erase everything, you would lose everything that you made, and you're stuck with it because autosave would take all of your progress away. Now, while resizing the map, it is here that I learned that this is how you change the map to square tiles, but by this point I had actually ended up editing my map too far in that I didn't want to erase everything and restart, so we just played with the unstable hex tiles. During our game, we also had a bit of trouble. Like I mentioned before, my friend had that issue where everything was black for her, but we also had this issue where my friend kept rolling the dice with the in-game dice roll option, but none of us could see what he was rolling. And the reason for that we ended up learning later was because none of us had clicked on the roll tab. But I mean, essentially, to me, I feel like if somebody's going to be rolling a dice, it should be just shown to everybody. We don't need to tune into a tab to see it. There was also this other point where I set initiatives for combat, only to realize that none of my friends could see the initiative and that was only shown to the host. It's not bad because I can tell people when to play, but also it would be kind of nice if they could follow along in the initiatives as well, and them not being able to see it felt kind of silly to me, and I didn't totally understand the reasoning behind that. There were also a few little visual glitches that happened along the way, like my friend suddenly slided to the right for no apparent reason, and also there was a point in the game where they weren't actually able to see any of the enemies on the map until I moved them, and not totally sure why that happened. Now, I feel bad with all this complaining, but this is really just nitpicking. Like, a lot of it is stuff that I think can be cleaned up with relative ease. And actually, because of the fact that a lot of this is early access, I really want to give as much feedback as I can to help it improve, because I really think that there is a lot of potential here. And the game could go really far with just a few small tweaks. I've been in pretty constant contact with the devs since I started playing this game, and they've been really good at actually updating the game with my suggestions as we went along. For example, when I accidentally deleted that tile, I messaged them right away asking them what I could do, and they realized that there was no way to actually change that, but they quickly updated it, so it's awesome, and it's exactly this kind of stuff that they're looking for. So I'd like to kind of throw a couple suggestions that I would personally like to see in the game that I think could really improve the quality of life in it. The camera was probably my biggest issue with the entire game, and probably the biggest part that made the game really difficult for me to play. It's really hard to convey, but it was really hard to tilt the camera just right. And I think implementing something like this, which is found in cam softwares like Fusion 360, could be really beneficial. It might be a little bit of my own bias from the hours I've spent using this software, but being able to manipulate the camera in the corner just by sort of tilting around and being able to snap to certain angles is really nice, especially when I found myself really wanting a top-down perspective pretty often when I was decorating the map. There's also a few other little things that might help. A more friendly title screen that's more straight to the point might be nice. Maybe some preset maps and the option to choose hex or square right from the get-go would be great as well. Being able to share initiatives and dice rolls with my friends without them being on the right tab would be great, and heck, even being able to share what I'm seeing on my web browser with them would be amazing. There's a lot of little things like that. Even just having maybe a little dice animation or the sound of dice rolling when somebody rolls the dice just so it gets everybody's attention could also be great. Overall, I have a great deal of confidence in this piece of software, and I really do think it could be something great with just a few little optimization tweaks here and there that I'm sure it's going to get over time once it gets out of an early access stage. Like I said, the dev has been super great at fixing up any issues right away, and they seem really passionate about what they've built here. Despite the issues I encounter, I would 100% recommend Dungeon 3D to somebody as long as they understood that it does need a little bit of polish in its current state. This right here though is a great foundation, and honestly it really added to some of the most fun I've ever had while playing D&D with my friends lately. If you want to see how this game went, by the way, just so you know that I'm not lying, you can find it on the second channel, and even in the second channel we weren't being the most nice about the game. There are moments where we did get kind of critical about the game within it, just so you know that it wasn't like a fluff piece where we're trying to overhype Dungeon 3D. At the moment, there's a Kickstarter and it is fully funded, which is awesome to see. But if you've liked what's been shown off and you're interested in getting this game when it does hit Steam, you can get a Steam key and all future updates for only like $10, which in my honest opinion is a absolute steal for this title, even in its current stage. You can find a link to the Kickstarter as well as the dev's personal channel pinned down below. And if you enjoyed this video and have any other thoughts on the matter, feel free to share them with me. And of course, I just hope you have a good one.